Were
Not so good, I know, some of them.
no, they
Okay.
were. I didn't hear anything that wasn't
No,
good.
okay,
But
okay.
were you at cabin 11 at Kings Point?
At cabin 16.
You were at
Ranger Island.
cabin 16.
Yes, there was two other, excuse me, no, you stop me anytime that you want to. The other, cabin 11, that was in Kings Point. When I went there was a ranger by the name of Hearn, a very fine man. Hearn, and then a fellow by the name of Valley. I have a picture of Valley here, if you'd care to have it.
Oh, that would be very nice. He just died, didn't he,
Yes,
last
that's right,
year?
out in British Columbia.
British
I park ranged
Columbia.
with him too.
And you knew Walt Hearn.
Very well, a very fine man.
Now,
Hearn.
when at cabin 11, they say he had this garden.
Something terrific. Flower gardens and vegetables.
And
See, he was
vegetables.
from England, an old country Englishman. And that's mine and these are yours. Okay, thanks. He was his father was a professional gardener, and he knew a lot about gardening and this and that, from his father, Oh,
Oh.
very fine man. Yeah.
He,
He was on there for years and years. Probably, don't take this for granted. See, I started Park Range in 1927, and 1928 I went to Basswood Lake with an old ranger by the name of Ted Detburn. I believe I have a picture of him here too. But Hearn was stationed over at Kings Point, known as Cabin 11.
was he alone at Kings Point?
No, this man Valley. Of
Oh,
course,
yes.
he's had many rangers before Valley's time and my time down there, but thanks, Ted. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's interesting. Then you signed on in 1927.
Yes, that is right.
And that was with Mr. Jameson?
Yeah, Mr. John Jameson. That's right. Please help yourself.
At that time, in 1927, the headquarters were at French
Lake.
Lake,
that's
and
right.
and Mr. Jameson was living.
He was the superintendent.
No,
I spent many a hard day there. He had a garden there, maybe a half an acre or more. Every set of rangers had to come in and do so much work in the summer in the garden, which was all right.
were the vegetables then used by the Rangers?
No, potatoes were at that time, pardon me, maybe $1 a bag, and he charges 10 cents a pound after us planting them and hoeing them and everything. No kidding, I'm giving you facts, you know what I mean? And not field.
Yes.
Yeah. He was on there for 18 years, John Jameson. Superintendent, he got fired. Premier Hepburn fired him directly. Thank you.
He was there for 18.
Approximately 18 years, yeah.
He was a political appointment, was he?
Yes, pardon me. Most of the superintendents those days, now I'm only a layman. Most of them, he was a government scaler before that. But a lot of those superintendents, maybe they were slicing bologna in a store or something, you know what I mean? It was politics. A lot of lumberjacks or farmers knew more as far as running the park than they knew, but they got the jobs, you know what I mean? No, I'm not belittling anybody, you know what I mean, but that's the way it operated. And if they didn't like the looks of you, they could fire you, and there was no return, you know what I mean?
When you came in 1927, where were you living at that time?
Well, I was single, and I worked in the 1925. See, I came up from the eastern Canada, from the province of New Brunswick.
Oh, did you? From New Brunswick?
Yeah, from we say Newcastle, that's the county seat. But I was raised on the Miramichi River, about 12 miles up from Newcastle, a place called Red Bank.
Really? You were from Red Bank?
In New Brunswick, that's right.
Well, you know, I was in New Brunswick this winter,
Uh-huh.
and the Indian people at Red Bank,
Uh-huh.
did you know Indian people living along
pardon me,
there?
I left there in 1925,
Yeah.
but I was back a few years ago. My son, which you met
Oh,
last summer with me,
yes.
and I have a brother. I have two brothers, one in Newcastle and one up a place up along the river there. And where I was raised was only about a half mile off of that Indian reserve in Red Bank there, where you cross the
Well,
big
they
bridge.
discovered a burial there.
Uh-huh.
An ancient, very
Uh-huh.
ancient Indian burial, and there are copper beads
Uh-huh.
on some of the bones,
Uh-huh.
and the copper has preserved some of the material,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very exciting thing. It
yes.
hasn't been written up in the papers
No.
yet, I don't think, but that was where you
Yeah, there's where I'm from. Mm-hmm. Originally.
and what possessed you to leave New Brunswick?
Well, pardon me, not being poverty. Things were rough, and they had what they called harvest excursions. Thousands of them came in the fall of the year in August from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, out to Manitoba, Saskatchewan. I'm known as the harvest fields. And I bought a ticket from Newcastle to New Brunswick for $19 a ticket, on the railroad. There was hundreds and hundreds of men on those things there, And then I went out there and harvest, what they call harvesting. They had old-fashioned binders. They cut the grain and we'd stook it and then thrash it. And I didn't like that out there, so I came back to Fort Frances and I worked in the lumbering woods for the Shevlin Clark Lumber Company for almost a year and a half or 2 years before I went park ranging.
That would be about 1925,
Yeah, 25, 26 in that area.
and worked for Shevlin Clark.
Yes, up north, Flanders, known as White Otter. I saw that country before, where there was hundreds of millions of feet of white pine in Norway standing before it was ever cut.
I'd love to see a picture of that, what it looked like then.
Out of this, or we'll never see it.
The beauty, eh?
Yeah, and
Just so
Pickerel Lake down here,
beautiful.
pardon me, from jumping White Otter. I saw that before they logged there.
I would-
Something fabulous.
I'd love to see a picture of it too. Art Madsen told me about the size of the white pines on Pickerel Lake.
That's right, that's right.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
wish they hadn't cut to the shore.
Oh, rotten politics. The lumber companies, they run the show. See, in the early days, before I can remember when they had the first qualified district forester. A man by the name of Stewart was the first man, and then a man came by the name of Davison. And Mr. Stewart got killed. He was only up here about a year. He was from around Toronto, but he was a very fine man and very capable. Him and the whole crew was killed at an airplane in Rainy Lake. And then there's a man that came in afterwards. He was a professional forester, and he was here for 4 years. A man by the name of Davison, and he put Rainy River on the map. He was a terrific man, strict but fair to everybody. He did more for Rainy River District than they did 50 years before, because before they had these so-called Crown and Timber agents, they were political appointments. They didn't probably didn't know anything, but as far as forestry, but they were the big bosses. You know what I mean? That's how
And they were
operated.
they could decide whether you could have so much for your...
Oh, yeah, and they made more money under the table than their salaries. That was only small stuff. That's they could go to Florida everywhere, right? Some that had summer, winter
What-
homes. You know what I mean?
What would they have to be bribed for? They'd have
Well,
to bribe them in order to...
Well, the scaling wasn't too accurate, which meant a lot of money. Please don't send that report
No.
to Toronto.
No,
please.
no. Well, it
Don't
might
hold
be a
me
good
liable.
thing.
So you might want me
It's
to
sort of
prove it.
history now.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be forgotten, but,
Uh-huh. Yeah. And the scalers, or what I mean, the companies, they had what they call government scalers. Some of them were honest, but they didn't stay too long. The honest ones, a lot of the timber was never scaled, and the government made money, the companies made money on that deal too.
Mm-hmm.
But the check scaler, which his hands was tied, and he was a poor man, but Richardson, I worked with him, kind of assisting with him at times. If he said too much, he wouldn't have a job either, eh? But he didn't get any graft because he raised a big family and he lived in a pretty poor home. You get me? I know pretty well his circumstances. But the companies, old Matthew and them, they dictated what scaler was supposed to be at each camp, eh?
Gosh. You said you were up in the White Otter area.
Oh, yes.
That was that after that Jimmy McCoolett?
And they, that's, Jimmy, they, known to the lumberjacks, they call him Jimmy McEwitt, and some call him Jimmy McQuat. The lumberjacks had a nickname for him, Jimmy Hightop.
That's right. Did you ever meet him?
No, pardon me, see, he drowned
later.
about 1919 or 1920. But I ranged with a park ranger by the name of Phil Bernasky.
I saw his name in our records, Bernasky.
Phil Bernasky, and he's originally came from Barry's Bay, Ontario.
Oh.
And I ranged with him. But anyway, him and a gator captain, which is a boat, they were the ones that found Jimmy Hightop, pardon me, drowned. He set a net, or was setting a net out in front of his castle there, and in a canoe, and he apparently upset, he got tangled up in the net and drowned it.
He was setting the net in front of the castle.
Yes, yes.
What would that be for?
Oh, for trout, or it was quite late in the fall. Yeah. They found him. They discovered
and
the
he
body.
just got tangled.
Yeah, he was under, wrapped, tangled up in the net.
Does that accident happen very often? That kind of thing
Oh,
happen?
not too often, but it does happen. If I'm talking to the...
no, it's perfect. Just perfect. So he was found by Bernasky.
Phil Bernasky, and which is dead now. He drowned on Namakan River. Him and another man by the name of McLeod. They were watching a rapids where the logs were going over for Shelburne Clark. Nobody knows what happened, but they were both found drowned. And Eve Grattan was the other man that with Bernasky. He's gone long ago too.
What was his name?
Everm, I guess. Grattan.
Oh. That name, Ephraim, one of the first rangers in Quetico, his name was Ephraim Crawford.
Crawford, I know, that's long before my time.
Yes, it was at the time of Robert Reedman.
I knew Bob Reedman. He was a fire chief later on in Fort Francis.
He's still alive.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Gosh, he must be in his 90s.
Yes.
He's got to be.
Yes. You knew him after.
Oh, long after. He was fire chief, excuse me, in Fort Francis, when I started to park range.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you ever talk to him about Quetico?
No, not very much. No.
So then in 1925 and 26, you were with Shevlin Clark.
Yes.
Was Matthew working for Shevlin Clark then?
No, Matthew was had his own company.
His own company.
Yes, but he was still logging too.
Yes.
In one division, and Shevlin Clark on the other. I guess you heard about Matthew deal with Shevlin Clark, eh? Well, this Shevlin Clark Lumber Company was a big outfit in the United States. And they came over here about 1910. A very fine, very capable company. And they sent this old Jim Matthew. He was their timber cruiser in Minnesota. And they, Shevlin Clark sent him over here to cruise the Rainy River District for timber. And they deposited a lot of money in one of the banks in Fort Francis. And they told Matthew to, thanks, I got some, thanks. If the country looked favorable, to buy make arrangements and buy the timber limits or lease them. Well, what Matthew did, he bought, with Shevlin Clark's money, he bought one timber limit in his name and one in Shevlin Clark's name. When old Tom Shevlin, the head of the company, found out what happened, the only thing he could do was to take him in as a partner. He took him in as a partner, and they started the Shevlin Clark Lumber Company in Fort Francis. That was one of the biggest sawmills in the world, one of the biggest. But after Matthew was so crooked with the company that Shevlin Clark decided the best thing to do is to buy him out, and they did. And they paid him $500,000 to get rid of him, get rid of old Matthew. And old Tom Shevlin told Mr. Matthew, he said, you know, you stole your way into the company. Matthew says, I'm not stealing my way out, though. You know. And then he became member of Parliament, and he run Rainy River District. He had a lot of power. In fact, he put Shevlin Clark out of here. You know what I mean? He had so much power. And then, you know, many ministers, but he got tied up with his old Peter Heenan, who was Minister of Lands and Forests.
Oh, just a minute. Now, what's that?
Go for about 10 minutes.
This was 1926, that you were up working for Shevlin Clark in the White Otter country.
Yes.
And that would be in the winter time.
Yes, that's right.
And then in the summer, you had decided then, or how did you hear about the job in Quetico?
Well, pardon me, I worked 8.5 months in White Otter in the lumber camp, and I drove approximately 108 days on the Little Turtle River, known as the Lumber Drive. And I was I was away, I guess, just about a year in the woods total at that time. I had about $800 or $900, which was a lot of money.
How old were you then?
Oh, about 16 years old.
And you'd been almost a year in the bush.
Yes, 8.5 months in the lumber camp, and approximately about 108 days on the Little Turtle River. We drove the logs from known as the Dufftail Lake down the Turtle River to Mine Center. It was a long, long drive, river drive.
You must have been a good worker that they kept you on for the drive.
Well, I guess I was raised on the Miramichi River. There was a lot of lumbering there, and when we were little kids like that, we could go on logs like nobody's business, you know what I mean? So it didn't bother me. They figured I was too young, you know, up here, and I wouldn't be able to river drive, but I could go on the logs at that time as good as the other river drivers.
Did you have special boots?
Yes, with corks in them. Yeah.
Did you have to buy those yourself?
Oh yes, oh yeah. Known as the Jefferson driving shoes. They were $12 at that time. Well, wages in the lumbering camps in those days was from $26 to $30 a month, and working in the woods. But the foreman gave me $35. That's as high as he could go. You know what I mean? I got $35. And see, you made your money in the summer because river drivers got $3.50 a day, which was big money, you know, in those days. But the sun was the clock from sunrise to sunset on those river drives. You get me? Long days.
Sunrise to sunset.
Yeah,
in
the summertime. That's right. 4 meals a day.
The cook would be very important.
Yeah, very important. Once in a while he'd made some moonshine and he'd get drunk, and then some of the lumberjacks have to cook. You know, it was a pretty tiresome job cooking, you know, that way. Mostly in tents, and, you know, although they had stoves that they used to float down in these boats, you know, they'd set up camps, you know, every so often, you know. But they did have a few, what they call river drive shacks in certain places, but sometimes they couldn't make that, so then they had to put up tents. They had what known as boatmen, you know, to run the boats and flat bottom boats, and there was, I think there was only one outboard motor at that time. They were scarce, and most of the time that didn't run. You get me?
So you had all this money then that you had earned.
Yes.
Who you didn't have it on your person?
Oh,
it
no.
would be kept by
No.
somebody.
I drew a little money because my mother was a widow woman. I used to send her so much money through the clerk in the camps each month. But then my main check was in Fort Francis. That's all I had to do was go up to the company office and get it. You know, they were a very reliable company, Shevlin Clark. They were honest.
Many of our park rangers that I read about, I can't quite recall the name of the one man, but his mother was in Arnprior, and he sent money, money every month to her as well.
There was pardon me, from that part of the country, there was a ranger by the name of Bannister. fellow by the name of Elliot. Elliot had a family though. He come up here during the Depression. He was a camp foreman for who? For McFadden Lumber Company at one time down the Blind River country. But then after, during the Depression, the things were bad down there too. But he managed to get up here and he got a job as a park ranger and he moved his family up. But then when things got back to normal again a little bit, he moved back to that area.
So then you came out of the bush and you had this money, but you was there an opportunity, or why did you think you'd like to be a park ranger?
Well, pardon me. They finished up logging up on that White Otter country there, Shelburne Clark did. So then they moved to Cowin and started to log Pickerel Lake. What's that lake back to Lake Eva Marion Lake. Yeah, it was a camp in there. I worked in there. There was a lumber camp in there. I worked in there for a short time, and then one of the rangers, I don't know whether he got fired or something, and I heard there was a vacant, and I walked clean from Marion Lake into French Lake, and I asked Mr. Jameson for a job, and he gave it to me. He said I was too young, but he gave me the job anyway.
Why you wouldn't make as much money as you were making in the logging?
We got about $85 a month. Of course, we had to board ourselves.
So that wasn't as much as you made in the camp.
Well, $26 to $35 a month, room and board in the lumber camp. See, we only got 3.5 in the summertime. No, it was a little better.
A little better.
Yes.
What month was that you went to see Mr. Jameson?
It was around about the 1st of April in that area. And he needed a extra ranger, and then he decided he should hire one more, so there was another lumberjack. He's out in British Columbia now by the name of Parker. Not Bert Parker, but his last name was Parker anyway. So we hauled the canoe up through French Lake, through French River, up to Lookout Island, and we patrolled in that area. And we stayed on the island. We didn't know too much about food, how much food to take or anything. And the ice went out of that lake quite late. We pretty much starved to death on the island waiting for water.
At that time, when you were on Lookout Island and the ice went out, would tourists start coming in?
There was some tourists, pardon me, not so much from the so-called the north end of the Quetico, but the south end, Basswood. It was always tourists.
Would they come up as far as Pickerel?
Oh, during the summer, oh yes, they come, some of them even, I know one man that's still living in Ely, he was a guide, two of them, Sandstead from Winton, Minnesota, Bill went from Mealy. They paddled up in this part of the country about 1920. That's before my time here. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Did you begin then to be told stories about the Quetico? When you first came, would you have heard about Chief Blackstone?
A little bit about Blackstone. He was the big Indian chief on Lake LaCroix there, #1. And then I met a Scotch half-breed Indian by the name of John Linklater.
I'm really interested in him because I talked to Bill Hansen.
Yes.
And Bill said he never met a man like John Linklater.
No, they don't grow them. Pardon me. No. One of the greatest woodsmen, it's only my personal humble opinion, one of the greatest woodsmen probably that ever hit this country, Yeah.
Was he a member of the Lac LaCroix?
His mother came off of Lake LaCroix. His father was a white man. His father was a Hudson Bay fur buyer. Linklater, see, apparently he was half Scotch and half Ojibwe Indian from Lac LaCroix Indian Reserve.
His mother was from Lac LaCroix.
Yes.
What would her name have been?
God only, pardon me.
You don't know if she was an Ottertail.
No, I couldn't answer that. See, if Mr. Linklater was living today, he'd be probably 125 years old. You know what I mean? Because but maybe Mr. Hansen told you, Bill Hansen. If I have it right, it was in the early 30s when he drowned it. Yeah.
He and his
he was up
wife
in
were in this canoe in
That's right.
Basswood Lake.
That's right.
And he was so knowledgeable. No one could understand how the accident happened, but it always does happen
Yeah.
sooner or later to people in the bush, I
Great
guess.
canoe, one of the greatest canoemen. Was something
Did
terrific.
you ever hear any?
Pardon me, you hear stories, probably, he drank some, but his wife drank a lot, and I don't know, maybe they were celebrating. It's hard to tell, you know what I mean?
Usually there's something
Yeah,
like
that. Oh, if he was if under normal conditions,
Nothing.
I would, unless he had a heart attack or something, be impossible for a man like that to drown.
Yeah.
Impossible, yeah.
Do you know who his wife was, what her name had
No,
been?
no. I saw her, I talked to her, but that's as far as, in that field, as far as I knew. But John Linklater was born down here on Baptism River on French Lake. There's where he was born. He was a Canadian. And he was a state game warden over there for years and years in Minnesota.
And very much respected.
One of the, he was a fine man. See, the governor in those days of Minnesota and all the big wheels. In fact, I don't think the governor was at his funeral, but there was a lot of big wheels from St. Paul that came to his funeral.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. Terrific woodsman. He told me he was about 14 years old when the Dawson expedition went through. You know, that's going back quite a while ago, 1885, or 1882.
Was his father, why were they living on Baptism Lake?
Well, pardon me, apparently they had, the Hudson Bay had, their main store was over here at Savannah. You came across the Savannah River. The Hudson Bay had a store there, pardon me for pointing, over 200 years ago. And then the Hudson Bay bought fur all through the country, and they had buyers, in many directions. And there's where he told me where he was born, Baptism River. And his father was a Scotchman, an old country Scotchman.
Were you ever told that there was a Hudson's Bay post at Pine Portage?
Pardon me, not to my knowledge, but I'm glad you brought that up. Dawson, pardon me from jumping from Hudson Bay to the Dawson.
This is fine.
Back in the early 30s, on that portage from Pickerel Lake into Doré Lake, on the left-hand side, the old foundations that was quite visible. Where Dawson did you run into them? That was Dawson's, according to John Linklater, that was one of his camps there.
Oh, well, that's excellent to find that out.
Well, pardon me, that's what he told me.
Bob Halliday also said he had a little sawmill there.
Well, they had they had, according to Linklater, and another old Indian over here, he died here some years ago, old Capity, we called him, at Huronian. He's dead now, which trapped here, I guess, maybe for 50 or 60 years.
I've heard his name.
And his father before him. Well, they had everything. They had about 1,200 men, Dawson did, on that expedition. He was the engineer. Dawson was the engineer on that expedition.
So this building that Dawson had on the Pine Portage, was it place for people to stay overnight using the route, or was it?
No, pardon me, I couldn't answer that, but see, with that many men and stuff,
Was it?
he had to stop on Pickerel Lake. He had to build a dam there. He had a lot of work, see. So it must have been one of their headquarters camps as they went along, because, they didn't go through overnight, with that many men, and built roads, and as you know, over portages and everything else, That was a big operation. And to what Mr. Edwards, now I'm jumping from another, the late Frank Edwards here from Savannah, he was in here before this railroad was built, the CPR. In fact, he was one of the first telegraph operators for the CPR in this area. He was an old country Englishman, this Edwards was, a well-cultured man of his day, and he was on this lake here when Dawson went through too, you know. Yeah.
Is he still alive?
Oh no, he's gone many years ago. I've talked to him a little bit, you know. No.
Did you ever hear the story? I'm just continuing on about
Right.
the Indians. I'll
Yes.
do that maybe
Yeah.
first.
No.
Did you ever hear, when you came and began to hear stories about the park, that Blackstone had died on Agnes Lake?
Pardon me, I saw some. That story. Pardon me, I heard that story, but I've heard so many other stories.
The reason I ask you is that Bill McGee, who is quite a storyteller, and it's hard to know what's truth and
Yes,
what's
yeah.
story.
From Ely, is he?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, from Duluth.
Yeah, I know his son owns the Wilderness Wings.
Yes,
commercial.
that's right.
Okay.
Well, we have the story from him that the chief, Blackstone, went searching for help for his people during the flu epidemic, which was 1918. Now I have records from the Indian Affairs Department that he was receiving treaty in 1920. So the flu epidemic was 1918.
Yes,
There is a
that's right.
picture of a grave on Agnes Lake,
Yes.
and they say that the Indian squaws brought gifts to this place. There are pictures of some of our old rangers.
Yes, way back. I saw
But,
that. Excuse me.
yeah.
Go ahead,
Well,
please.
do you know anything about
Pardon me. I'll tell you who could maybe help you out a lot on that issue. Would be Bill Hanson in Ely, the man that you.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, yeah. See, Bill Hanson is in his 80s too, I believe, eh?
Yes.
And this Blackstone, he played the boundary waters a lot, eh? Up and down. And Leo, this Lenore.
O'Driscoll? Chota?
Yeah, her father, I often heard her father talk about Blackstone. I guess he was a very powerful Indian, you know what I mean?
This is
Forest
what,
Pack and all that stuff.
strong.
Yeah, very powerful. I never saw Blackstone myself, you know what I mean? But I knew he was the Indian chief.
He must have made an impression on people.
Oh, yes.
So you think he was strong and
Power. That's right.
see, he wasn't chief for very long.
No.
He was number one on the band
Uh-huh.
for many years, but he only was chief for a short while.
Uh-huh.
I keep wondering why people talk so much about him. He must have been very intelligent or knowledgeable about the bush.
Well, he
or-
resented the white man, according to what I've been told.
That's right.
And he was kind of like one of the big stars or heroes, a little bit, among the Indians, and the whites respected. That's fine. Thank you so much. Some claims that he was able to pack 600 pounds. You know what I mean? That's according to Leo Chosa. You know, Leo was a part Indian too, a quarter breed Indian.
But Leo talked about him.
Oh, a lot. Yes. Of course, I was young and.
Leonore might know some of
She
the
might
stories.
have some, and Bill Hanson, pardon me, I'm sure Bill Hanson would have a lot of knowledge about Blackstone. And to the best of my knowledge, he was buried on the boundary waters there someplace. I saw that picture of so-called Blackstone being buried on McKenzie Lake or wherever it was down here. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, you know.
I was just figuring out, you're over 70.
Pardon?
You're over 70.
I'm 70, I'm over 70 is right. That's right. Born 1908.
1908.
Yeah.
What year did you cease being a ranger in Quetico?
Approximately about 1940. When did the war start? The Second World War.
39.
Well, in that area.
So
Yeah.
you were under Jameson and then under Ron.
Ron. That is right. That's fine. Thank you.
There is in Ron's journal He leaves Cache Bay to paddle back to Pickerel, to French Lake, in 1939, and he says in his journal, very worried about the war in Europe.
Oh, yes.
And then there's nothing more in the diary.
No.
Now, to go back to to your, well, I wonder if I could ask you just one or two more
You
things.
betcha. Anything, please.
About Mr. Linklater. Were there any things that you heard? You heard he was an excellent woodsman. You knew he was born on baptism.
River in French Lake.
Had you heard that a family called Ottertail had a cabin on French Lake?
The Ottertails, pardon me, they did. They belonged, I knew Charlie Ottertail, Tom Ottertail. I think they're all dead now. Charlie Ottertail became chief later on. But there's a grave known up at the Pines, as you go through the French River from French Lake into Pickerel Lake there, where known as the Pines. There's a little Indian grave, and that was one of the Ottertails buried there. See, they worked all through that country there, from Lake LaCroix, the Indians did.
But did the Ottertails keep a winter cabin or a permanent cabin on French Lake?
No, I can't answer that. But they had wigwams. I saw skeletons of old wigwams on the North Shore, South Shore, Pickerel Lake, and all through that country. And they were mostly all Indians. And they either came from Emo or Lake LaCroix. That was their trap-lock grounds until the...
They would come from as far away as Emo.
Oh, yeah, lots of them. And also mine center known as the Wild Potato Reserve. There's where Capita, old man Capita, that was his reserve, where he trapped a Huronian there.
The reason they came was not fish, but animals.
Yeah, that was their trapping. And winter homes. Most of them stayed probably all winter or communicated back and forth. See, this railroad over here that runs through to Atikokan, that wasn't finished until the year 1900. This Canadian National that runs through to Fort Francis. And they were in here long before that, by canoe and snowshoes.
Did you do a winter patrol then that first year in 1927?
Yeah, from then on, see, it was subdivided. There was 12 rangers, 6 pairs, and each pair of rangers had a certain area to patrol. We were on the year round.
Would you have met these Indian people then at the...
Well, no, the only time, there were so-called poaching.
Oh, of course, they weren't allowed.
No, there wasn't, but legally, the Department of Lands and Forests, I don't think they could have stopped them, but they did anyway, you know what I mean, because that was their trapping rights.
That seems to have been a very difficult thing. The Indians traditionally had trapped in the park. That was their way. And in 1909, they were told they could no longer do it.
That's right. See, when the park was formed, 1909, 1910, in that area, then there wasn't supposed to be any trapping in there. You know what I mean?
So what did the Indians do?
Well, they almost starved to death. They were on that reserve. You probably were there, too, on Lac LaCroix. They didn't have much trouble, but they did poach, so-called poaching. They did.
But they could not find trapping grounds outside the park.
There wasn't much left for them, you know. Because that whole Quetico Park, that was our main trap line. That was a fabulous area, you know, for trapping.
And outside the park, other people had the trap line?
Well, up until, I forget now when it's changed, see, an Indian didn't have to have no license to trap. But anybody in Ontario wanted a trapping license, you could buy one. No matter who you were or what you were, see? Which was a bad setup, you know what I mean?
There was no, there would be people on top of each other.
Yes, which was real bad.
There was no fur out beside the park before, say, 1930 and before that. The park was the only place where there was any real fur left.
The country was cleaned right up.
By over-trapping.
Or disease too, both.
Yeah, both. The park was the only thing that was left.
Yes,
before
that's right. That's right. that's right.
A lot of people give credit for the comeback of the beaver to the fact that the park was protected and the animals could move out of the park and
Yes.
fill the areas as a reservoir.
Yes, and the department had, the conservation, the Ontario Conservation Department, this last 25 or 30 years, they did a lot to bring it back. In fact, they brought beaver by either by train or airplane from the Algonquin Park up here to Rainy Lake and many other things to get the thing going. And up until this year, I believe there's more game today than there ever was. You know, for the last 50 years or more.
For beaver, anyway.
Oh yeah, and many, of course, all animals, as you people know better than I do, they go in cycles. But at one time in my day here, there wasn't a beaver on Lake Mille Lacs here, and there wasn't a marten, or you know what I mean. It was either the disease got a lot of them, and the trappers they trapped them out too, both.
And porcupines are a strange thing that they're non-existent in the park now, almost.
Yes.
They were there in your day.
Oh, we were infested with them. You couldn't leave a wooden boat any place on the portage to be all chewed up. Now they're migrated. They're all down around in Hayward, Wisconsin, and all through that country. There's thousands of porcupines, and fish are down there to no end. But the fisher's gone. See, they can say what they like. The main food for a fisher is porcupines. The main diet. Now you may been educated different on that deal. I don't know, but the porcupines is the main food for fish.
What do you think happened to the porcupine?
God, I don't know whether they cut all the pine. It's a strange cycle.
A lot of they have to have big pines.
Yes, that's right.
So it'd probably be a final thing would be the fire as well as the pine were gone, then the fires and the logging. The Indian people, when they tried then to trap outside the park, found that it had already been trapped
Yes,
by many people.
Yes, that's right. There was trappers. You know, they had trap lines in cabins, say all along, from Thunder Bay right through to Fort Francis, and I can't tell you from there and on. But there was men that trapped on their lines, were stationary there for years and years and years. And some of them, believe it or not, some of them trappers were conservationists. Although it was illegal to trap beaver, but they trapped some, but they always left some, so they had something for the next year. You know, some of them were good,
To sort
some
of
wasn't.
maintain their
Yes,
line.
yeah.
Now, Mr. Sotto says that he traps and takes everything, and then leaves his line for 3 years to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard that kind of.
I've trapped quite a few beaver in my day, and I have a trap line here, as Ted knows. What I do, for every 3 beaver houses I have on the line, unless they're killing timber or commercial timber or something, I trap 2 houses pretty hard. I leave 1 house, I don't touch it all. And I have quite a lot of beaver. The reproduction is pretty good.
That's interesting.
See, they're supposed to take, 1.5 beaver out of a house or something at one time here. How are you going to take a half a beaver? You know what I mean?
Did you ever hear of a family called Kilcheski?
From, I knew the late old Mr. Frank Kilcheski from Rainy Lake. Frank Kilcheski.
Right, yeah. Yes. He seems like a most unusual man who had left Minneapolis and wanted to live, where he could raise his family in the woods.
Yes.
And I haven't met his son, but I met the son's wife.
Uh-huh.
And she told me how the little girl cut her finger,
Mm-hmm.
top off her finger, and the father had encyclopedias, and he knew how to stitch it back on.
Yes.
He seemed to have a lot of skills.
He was, for a man of his day, now I'm talking about in the 30s. See, I used to go to Fort Francis once in a while, and I met him through other lumberjacks, the old man Frank Kilcheski. And he was a very fine man. He commercial fished a little bit on Rainy Lake. He trapped, and he was a big game and fish guide besides.
Oh,
And he
he's a
also
guy.
was a professional, at one time he was a professional wrestler, which no man in Fort Francis or International Falls could handle him, but the nicest man in the country. Some of them tough lumberjacks used to pick fights with him, you know. He wouldn't hurt them, but he'd tie them up in 2 seconds, you know what I mean? That's all he'd do to them, you know. He wouldn't hurt them. He could have, you know.
Apparently, he began to feel when the highway came in around Mine Center that it was beginning to be too crowded, so he moved to Alaska.
He did, eh?
Took his
I
whole
lost
family.
all, it's quite possible.
Ketchikan, Alaska. And one of the sons was using his skidoo up there and was drowned in the spring. Now, another boy was drowned on a trap line near Nestor Falls. But he built boats, didn't he? Did he?
No, I can't answer that.